Hello and welcome to Why Wait Till Sunday. We are continuing our run through all the positions for 2022 prospects. Of course, this is going to be guys who just finished their second year and also guys who are projected to return to school now that today is National Declaration Day, basically, where the underclassmen are going to say if they're going back to school or not. This is a weird year because no matter how many years you've already spent in school, you can choose to go back for another year. So typically we'd see fourth year guys or certainly fifth year guys automatically enter the NFL draft pool, and most of them are, but some of them can come back. And so, throughout the day today, we're going to keep getting some declarations, and I'm doing my best to stay on top of it and keep guys in this. One we'll talk about, Jeremy Ruckert just said he's going back to school today, so I had to insert him back into the rankings. But these are going to be guys projected that will be in the 2022 draft pool. And we're going to talk about tight ends. Now, tight ends, I think, is a bit of an overlooked area, and it's one that's difficult to scout. I mean, for fantasy, we want athleticism. We want guys who are going to command targets, of course. We want receptions. But the tight end position is twofold, right? You have to be a reasonable pass blocker, especially to make an NFL team and to, earn your roster spot. It's not likely. We do like these hybrid guys, but, if you can only do that, it's probably going to be difficult unless you're an absolute monster at the collegiate level. And basically they want to use you as a slot or a split out guy. So what goes into a successful tight end at the NFL level? I went back and looked at tight ends who, since 2003, that have, either been successful for fantasy in the NFL or not. Basically broke it down into greater than 3 top 5 career finishes at the position, at least 1 top 5 finish at the position, and then the bucket of guys who were non-top 5 finishers. The total number is 9 tight ends were greater than 3. 22 tight ends had at least 1 top 5 finish, and 268 had non-top 5 finishes. And that's because, really at tight end, you do want the elite guys. After that, you can stream or whatever. So that's why I cut it off as a top 5 finish. And the group that did finish in that top 5 had at least 75 receptions in their college career. They had at least 1,200 total yards in their college career. Their median market share that they hit was 15%. And the guys who never finished top 5 were more like 65 career receptions, only 805 career receiving yards, and a market share of only 8.8%. So there's a pretty big difference there. We're looking for tight ends who had at least 15% of their market share. And that's what we're going to go forward looking at for, just kind of as some check boxes that we want to do. And plus, of course, we'll talk about what we see actually on the tape. So let's go to the 2022 class. I've got as my number one tight end right now, Trey McBride from Colorado State. He is a really, really good, strong-looking prospect. He is obviously not in a Power 5, but he did break out with at least 15% of his receiving market share in year 2. His best market share year was now 38% this past year in a shortened season, of course. He lined up in the slot about 45%. And, I like that number. I really don't want too high of like a slot percentage guy. And we'll talk about someone later who had 90% in the slot. He's not really a tight end. I mean, he's a glorified receiver. And, I'm not sure how that's going to translate in terms of draft capital, what NFL teams are going to think he is. Is he going to be more of a tweener? But Trey McBride certainly is more of a traditional tight end, but got out in the slot 45%. So I like that. That's a nice number. So he's commanded some targets at a very early age. Even as a freshman, he was out there getting some looks. Then his second year as with Warren Jackson on the team, getting a ton of looks. He still had a market share of 15%. And then as his third year, this shortened season in 2020, just was a total beast. I mean, he took all the looks, even ahead of a guy a lot of people like, Dante Wright. In the film room, he looks like a really strong blocker. I have to say, looking at all the guys this year, he was one of the strongest looking guys I saw. He really engages with his defender. He holds the block pretty well. And really out in space. I mean, when he gets moving and goes out trying to block a defensive back, he locks in and he does it. And to me, that's difficult to get running. You're at speed and you got to land that block and get hands on a guy. And I saw him do that a lot. He did play a lot of outside as well, so they certainly used him as a receiver, which was really nice. He's kind of looks like an all-around guy. He's thick. He looks strong out there. I was really, really impressed. I mean, I got to say, out of all the guys I looked at, he just looked the most well-rounded, full package. He does have the metrics that are going to hit. We'll see about athleticism, but he looks athletic out there. I mean, a lot of these guys, you have to change your mindset because they, none of them really look like a wide receiver, running backs when you're looking at all that film and you're, impressed. The tight ends, of course, it's a different position. They're all much, much bigger, and they just don't quite do the same things. But Trey McBride looked very strong. I think the class is weaker than this 2020 class or 2021 class, of course. And right now, I just think he looks well-rounded. He's put the metrics on paper. He has done it, on tape. I really like what I saw. And I think he's kind of a dark horse, but he's my number one guy right now. TE2 is Jalen Wittermeyer from Texas A&M. He was the actual second-rated tight end in the class. Baylor Cupp, who hasn't been able to get on the field, was, I think, the number one tight end in the country or second for his recruiting class. But Wittermeyer's come in, and the guy has produced immediately on entering the Texas A&M tight end room. He broke out in year 2 with 23% of the market share. He was close in year 1. I think he had, somewhere between 10 and 15. He definitely got on the map even in year 1, but technically broke out in year 2. He looked good this year in the full SEC schedule, which we can't forget about that. 38% in the slot. That's nice. He's huge. He's like 6'4" or 5, pushing 270 pounds. And he looks it on tape. He's a huge body, of course, and uses it well when he catches the ball, but he definitely doesn't look super dynamic. He's athletic, don't get me wrong. He had one play against Alabama of all teams where he caught a deep pass to the corner of the end zone and leaped up over a safety, kind of full extension and caught it. But overall, I would say he just looks like a 270-pound tight end. I mean, he's not slow necessarily, but he doesn't explode to me. He doesn't look incredibly athletic. He's obviously done enough to command, targets in this offense. They don't really have a great wide receiver to speak of that's done it yet. So he's kind of their primary option, and he gets the job done, with his size, with his SEC pedigree, and he has put the metrics on in the spreadsheet here to be someone we need to look at. Not terribly impressed in his, dynamism, but I think with all the rest of the things we can expect, he's probably going to be a pretty, talked about NFL prospect. Coming from the SEC is huge in terms of how people are going to look at him, and he's done it. So another thing about, being 270 pounds, you'd think he'd be a devastating blocker. I saw him being okay. I saw him miss some stuff. He got a little manhandled, but it was Alabama tape. So, maybe we can give him a pass, although he's going to have to face Alabama level defenders in the NFL. He's still young. I mean, he just completed his true sophomore season, so he can learn how to, maybe get some more leverage in the blocking game. But at his size, I kind of thought he was going to be a stone wall out there, and just seemed a little leaky getting his blocks in. So right now he's my number 2 because he seems well-rounded, and we've got pedigree here. And, he has been an asset in the passing game for sure. I just don't know if he's got that athleticism we're going to need because he kind of looks like 270 out there. All right. TE3, Brant Kuthi from Utah. He fell a little bit this year for me initially because they had such a weird season in the Pac-12. Didn't play many games, and Utah was breaking in a new quarterback. The quarterback was a transfer. So I wasn't thrilled with what we saw from Utah, but I really liked him out after his true sophomore season, where he did break out with 16% of his team's market share. He played 57% in the slot this past year. He's a converted wide receiver in high school. He's a little undersized for a tight end. That's a problem. Potentially. I mean, 6'2", 230. We have seen guys do it at that size before. Jordan Reed was about that size. And, what Jordan Reed had, who else was that size? Is Delaney Walker was that size, but Delaney Walker ran a 4.4 and was, just one of the most athletic freaks you could have. And Jordan Reed, also an athletic freak. Kuthi looks incredibly dynamic. I mean, he is in that mold where, when he catches the ball, he looks like a wide receiver. I mean, watching all this film, and then Brant Kuthi comes on and it's like, oh, that guy has, he's smooth. He makes cuts. He makes the guy miss after the catch, but it's not that like lumbering, kind of half-hearted juke. Like, he's making quick cuts, getting around guys, and very impressive. He also has done a lot on the ground. Utah loves to give him jet sweeps. They want to get him involved. They want to get him the ball. And with good reason. I mean, he takes these jet sweeps around the end. He's not even cutting it up the middle to score like a lot of tight ends do when they do that. He's getting jet sweeps around the corner. He's beating defensive ends and linebackers to the outside and getting in the corner of the end zone on a couple of plays. So, he might be like potentially a Jonnu Smith. These guys are a little undersized, but just hyper athletic. And that's what he looks like to me. So he would need to be in a team that's going to be willing to kind of be creative. He's not your traditional tight end. Looked okay blocking. I mean, I certainly saw him get in front of guys, get in position, but he would get pushed back consistently 1 or 2 steps, hold the block, but get pushed back, which obviously is not exactly what you want to see. And at 230 pounds, that makes sense. I mean, he's taking on, guys who are equal with him in weight, sometimes bigger than him maybe. And so that kind of showed. I mean, I think his size showed a little bit when he had to be real physical, as that, tight end blocking role, but just dynamic with the ball. I mean, certainly a weapon. And he sits at number 3 for me just because this is a fantasy podcast or a fantasy show. And in terms of fantasy, if someone would draft him and get the ball in his hands, I think you could have a very fantasy relevant player, even if he's not a complete tight end. Jake Ferguson is my 4. He's from Wisconsin, and he broke out in year 1. I think he barely got to 15%. His best year is 24% of the market share. He's basically been their number 1 receiver for, I think, year 1 and year 3 this year. The year 2 was when Quintus Cephas came back, and he led the team in receiving. But other than that, it's been Jake Ferguson now since he stepped on campus. Being at Wisconsin, you would figure he is a good blocker. He makes solid attempts there. Pretty just strong guy. He's lining up mostly in line as a tight end, 28% in the slot, very rarely out wide. Of course, they're going to run the ball a ton, and that's what he's used for. He, more of a traditional tight end, but he obviously commands the targets when they do want to throw. A lot of times they have been throwing to Ferguson. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see tons of athletic intrigue when he catches the ball because there's not a lot of receptions on his tape. I mean, Wisconsin throws the ball like 10 times a game. I didn't see a lot from him, but I know that, just having that market share, that's what helps us. If you don't have the raw volume, you can kind of infer that he is commanding the looks, he's commanding the targets, even as a freshman. And so that's where market share comes in when a guy only has 15 receptions on the season, but it was 30% of the team's output. Then we know that when they dropped back, they looked for Jake Ferguson. And so that tells me a lot. I have to say, I just kind of an NA, incomplete grade in terms of some of his athleticism and what I see after the catch, because I just wasn't able to catch it on film. The guy we talked about, Jeremy Ruckert, he has declared he is coming back to school. So that means he's going to be in the 2022 rookie class from Ohio State. I think he was the number 1 or very high recruit during his year coming out to Ohio State. He hasn't really hit any kind of market share value yet. Because Ohio State has such great receivers and will continue to have great receivers. So we're not probably going to be able to use market share for Jeremy Ruckert. But the argument also is, what is his receiver room going to look like in the NFL? Because it's going to have, Ohio State's receiver room plus. So I don't really care that he had tough guys to compete against, because you still got to command the targets over guys like Jamison Crowder if you're going to the NFL, and that's what we want to see. He's a pretty good blocker. For that Ohio State team, he had a slot percentage of 35. I saw some catches, a seam route that he got open and caught a touchdown. Not tons of impressive stuff for me. He's obviously good. I think he's a well-rounded tight end. I don't see, he's here in the middle of the top 10 because probably going to be a reasonably high draft pick coming out of Ohio State. If he tests well and all that. He's got pedigree, he's got all that stuff, and he looks competent, certainly out there on the field. So I don't see an incredible upside. But I also think he's going to be on an NFL team, and so he's going to be relevant. We're talking about, a top 10 within a class. So tight end drops off no matter what. Within its own class, it's going to drop off pretty fast. So, honestly, after I really like McBride, Whittermeyer, and Brant Kuithe for the reasons I explained in terms of upside. After that, these guys are all kind of a who knows. I had to put them in an order, of course, but you're falling off pretty quickly in a tight end list within a single class. How many tight ends get drafted any given year that you care about for fantasy? I mean, not many. So, but these are names we want to monitor. 2 tight end leagues get more impressive. We're talking about Devy. So if you have a 2 tight end league, maybe you are more interested in tight ends. And then also, campus to Canton leagues where you need to build incredible depth. You want to have these names. So Sam Laporta for Iowa comes in at number 6. Converted wide receiver, true sophomore this year, did get 18% of the market share for Iowa. And we know Iowa is a tight end factory. So a little bit of benefit of the doubt coming from Iowa. I mean, George Kittle, Fant, and TJ Hawkinson, all in the last few years. They obviously know how to recruit and groom and develop tight ends. He had 33% in the slot. He is a converted receiver from his high school days. A big kid, 6'4", 6'5", 245. These guys are all in similar weight, unless I kind of mention a specific difference. So on tape, I was expecting to see a little more athleticism. I've heard a lot of people like Laporta, thought he broke out this year, really excited about him. And I kind of thought I was going to see a guy who, makes catches. And I guess in my head, I just had like a George Kittle, Kittle, Fant, Hawkinson in my head. Is this guy the next great, athletic tight end out of Iowa? I didn't see that. I saw a big guy who can make catches over, safeties, over linebackers. But I didn't see a lot of yak. I didn't see a lot of, making a catch, making a guy miss, getting around a guy for extra yards, and certainly did not see breaking a seam or, breaking any angle of any kind and getting big chunks. He made some catches, but he didn't seem to make any catches, above expectation, I should say. So, Sam Laporta is there. He did break out. Iowa loves to throw to the tight end, obviously. So I guess it's not even that shocking that he, hit the market share, just because they're going to throw to their tight end a pretty good amount. But, I didn't see anything terribly impressive from an athletic standpoint for him. Charlie Kohler, Iowa State. I was disappointed. On metrics, he broke out in year 3. He had 18.5% of the market share, so we like that. 60% in the slot. He's like 6'6", kind of a big guy. If you watch his highlights, actually, you see some athleticism on display. kind of ripping a seam. If he can get untouched, he can get moving and cover a lot of ground with these big strides. But watching a full game where you're not getting the highlights, you're kind of just getting, every play in and out, really got less impressed. I didn't see a very good blocker. I didn't see a very physical guy. I saw him get, pushed and knocked off routes coming around the middle. Linebackers check him and he kind of stumbles a little bit. I didn't see a guy who's playing really physical football. And at tight end, that's going to be tough unless you're just, a package, player where you come in the goal line and he's 6'6". So maybe he does get a couple jump balls. He can do that for sure. But I just didn't see a guy who is dominant on the field really in any way, shape, or form. He looks somewhat long and lanky out there. But he doesn't look super fast. He doesn't look incredibly athletic. We'll see, eventually he'll have a 40 time and some other metrics, but he just on the film to me did not look, special athlete, and didn't look like a, tough athlete. I mean, I can say this from my basement, as a 37-year-old dude who weighs 175 pounds, but I'm evaluating these guys, for all I can do. And I'm not throwing shade. It's just, I didn't see it out there for Charlie Kolar. So he drops pretty far. I mean, I think a lot of guys have him top 3, probably in that class. He's going back to school. So presumably did not get an amazing grade from the NFL. And, that's also a slight concern there. Greg Dulcich from UCLA, really out of nowhere. This guy was a walk-on in 2018. I think I saw ESPN had him as a 3-star. 247 did not have him rated at all. I went back and looked, didn't even have a picture on his profile. So really out of nowhere, but a good build, 6'4", 245, and was a beast this year for UCLA. 26% of their market share. I mean, he led the team out of really nowhere. 45% in the slot. I have limited film. Shout out to Devy Deep Dive, who has a cut up of Greg Dulcich, who has cut ups of Greg Dulcich, but shout out to him. You should follow him if you're listening to this. Check out his YouTube page. Devy Deep Dive. Brandon Lejeune does great work, and so I was able to look at him a little bit. He looks real athletic. I like this guy. We don't know much about him. Like I said, I mean, kind of a nothing prospect, and has 1 year on his resume now for UCLA in his 3rd year. And after, I think, a red shirt and then not much in 2019. Short season, for Pac-12, but he was a guy who popped despite the strange offseason and all that. So we'll have to see what he does next year, but I have to say he looks athletic. There was a really nice play. He did beat, kind of down the seam. He beat his man by a couple steps. I think someone got caught on some play action and was basically wide open, but he finished the drill. I mean, he caught it, and then, corners were on the outside, and he was able to split the middle of the field and take it, and really no one caught him at all. So he's got that speed to get there. It's about a 50, 60 yard run. So, enough speed where if you catch it in the open field, he could go. He looked very flexible. He looked very athletic. Very interesting guy. It's 26% of a market share for a tight end. He's actually the second most of any of the guys I've looked at here, with the exception of Trey McBride. So I didn't have a whole lot of him as a blocker. Not really sure what to say there. So incomplete, but certainly very interesting guy and looked very athletic. Power 5 conference check mark there, which, all this, it's competition, but it's also presumed draft capital and all that. So he's got himself on the map. Keep an eye on him. We have Cole Turner. This was a guy I was talking about from Nevada, 90% in the slot, converted wide receiver out of high school. And I've seen him listed as a wide receiver. I've seen him listed as a tight end. I think he's probably more tight end than probably more 6'6" wide receiver than a true tight end. 90% in the slot. I mean, he's barely ever lining up as an actual inline tight end. Which I'd say is great. I mean, for fantasy, that's awesome. But what is an NFL team going to see him as? Not really playing tight end, listed as a tight end, probably not quite, physically gifted enough to be a wide receiver. We'll have to see. Him and Carson Strong will get another year out there in the desert, and certainly incomplete on Cole Turner. But 20% of his team market share. And if you look at any film out there for him, wasn't able to get like a full game film, but if you look at any, highlights, very clearly they like to isolate him out on a DB, especially near the goal line and throw the fade to him. I mean, he's 6'6" and he can outmuscle a guy. So that's what they like to use him a lot as, and he was very successful in that role. And then Josh Weil for Cincinnati. He's on my list here. Technically not a breakout. I think it's his third year at Cincinnati. This past year had 14% of their market share. So right on the cusp of a 15% quote unquote breakout for a tight end. But I like what I saw. I mean, he had a play against UCF that is really what you want, a crossing route where he comes over the middle of the field, catches the ball, but then he does turn upfield and hits a gear, right? And is able to beat, chasing DBs and stuff like that. Someone I think gets close to him near the goal line, but he's already basically in and, gets in standing up on about a 40-yard pass play. So, to me, when you're looking at speed, you can't always tell. You don't always get these wide open runs, but you do like to see a guy when he does get that lane, when he does turn a corner and beat some angles, where DBs are chasing him. That says something. Like, I don't know what his 40 time is, but, he did hit, when you're watching the tape on that play, at least he hits a second gear and is able to really get upfield and wasn't able to be caught for a tight end. That's more impressive to me almost than the other one where he splits down the middle and, there's really no DB near him. But the play against UCF for a while, really impressive. He actually did it a second time and breaking some tackles along the sideline, showing good balance, staying in bounds, and would have scored another touchdown in that game, but it got called back from penalty. 51% in the slot. And I need to go back and continue to watch some film. I mean, we're 2 years out for these guys. I definitely don't have a final opinion on them yet. And especially the back end of this list is going to change a lot probably. And maybe even the front end. I mean, we got a lot of time here. But he looks really athletic. I would say that didn't get a ton of blocking. I mean, I watched a couple of games, including the full UCF game. And since he used another guy, number 87, to do a lot of the inline blocking. So I think while maybe a little bit limited, he might be more of a pass catcher, but did get some in there as a tight end and was actually I believe their leading receiver, either in yards or receptions, and second in the other category. So looked at a lot. And that's what we want for our fantasy teams. Possibly a little incomplete. I think they use some other guys to do some actual blocking. And so that's the top 10. Trey McBride, Weidermeyer, Kuthi, Ferguson, Bruckert, Laporta, Kohler, Dulcich, Turner, Weil, assuming all these guys are eligible and come out, next year. And then we have a watch list. I'll go into these guys a little bit quicker, but Isaiah Likely for Coastal Carolina. The reason he's watch list and not actually ranked for me right now, looks like he doesn't play hardly any actual tight end. I mean, I saw a little bit, but a lot of lining out fully out wide, converted wide receiver from high school, and 29% in the slot. I don't know. I mean, these tweener guys, what's an NFL team going to see them as? I'm just not sure. Are they glorified receivers? But he looks very athletic. You can tell he was a receiver at one point. He's got a couple big long plays this year, 75 yards where he dusted a safety. So very athletic, looks good, has some long speed, but is he really a tight end? I think kind of remains to be seen. Joshua Simon for Western Kentucky, small school, of course, but broke out in his second year, 17.5% market share for them, 46% in the slot, converted receiver. So you like to see that. I mean, I want to see converted receivers. I was able to get a tape of Joshua Simon. I mean, sometimes you just search stuff and you're so pleasantly surprised. I can't believe Joshua Simon has, a cut up of him. I believe it was, I would love to give it. It was Fantasy FF Astronauts. has a Joshua Simon game against Western Michigan. So kudos to you. Love shouting out these guys. I don't know who decided to cut up a Joshua Simon game, but I am very thankful. He looked at he lined up as a tight end. I mean, he was doing some real blocking. He was doing some stuff at the line, sometimes off the line, but basically right behind the tackle, and then running routes and looking pretty good. That game, he had like 6 for 105, so it was a good game to do for him. And got to 100 yards at the tight end position. Couple overthrows. I mean, he had a big seam, wide open that was overthrown. Playing with the Western Kentucky QB, of course. I like this guy. I think he's very athletic. He's another one that kind of pops when he catches the ball and looks pretty athletic, but we'll have to keep watching him. He may not declare. Some of these guys from smaller schools, if they declare in after their third year, they probably need to have a huge junior season. Quentin Morris for Bowling Green, converted wide receiver, and plays like it. Bowling Green, really bad. Their quarterback's horrible. But he's put some numbers on paper and, commanded a pretty big market share, 35%. Then we have Cade Otton for Washington, and he had 27%, his best market share year this year as a fourth-year player. So Cade Otton, I was surprised to see it was his fourth year this year when he broke out. So he did command a huge market share in the shortened Pac-12 season, 27%, 33% in the slot. And I'll be honest, at the timing of this video, I haven't really gotten a chance to look at him on tape too much. Jury's out. I mean, certainly a late breakout, which for tight ends, I'm not that worried about it. I know tight end does take a long time to develop, but I thought he was like a second or third year guy, and he redshirted, and this was his fourth year. So we'll see, but he's coming back to school, and we'll get another year, full year next year, and I think he could, pop. Nick Muse for South Carolina. He is a transfer from William and Mary, and had 21% market share in his second year at William and Mary, then transferred to South Carolina in his third year, didn't do a whole lot, and now in his fourth year had 19% of the market share for South Carolina. And he looked pretty good, 45% in the slot. Yeah, he's older. This is a fourth-year breakout, basically, but, and he's another guy who's going to come back for a fifth year, like Otton, I believe, and we'll have to keep an eye on him, but he looks good, and was able to be kind of neck and neck with Shi Smith for that South Carolina team. And we'll see next year. He could, be the number one receiver for the Gamecocks. So keep an eye on Nick Muse. I think he's an interesting guy. Now that he's in the SEC, he's going to get, a lot more looks. I think it was a good move to go and get that kind of exposure, and hopefully he'll wind up on an NFL team. So that's the 2022 class for me. I also did go back to the 247 and look at guys that should have been ranked or were ranked. But honestly, if they haven't done anything in their third year, like if I don't even recognize the name, what are you hoping for? So I kind of I just went through these old lists to make sure I kind of didn't miss an obvious guy. But otherwise, at this point, I think you got to see what have they done on the field. And so that's my list. I mean, there could be some guys sneaking around that could pop late. One comes to mind is Baylor Cupp for Texas A&M. I know a lot of people love him, but now he's been injured for 2 straight years. Wettermeyer is making a case that he is the guy. And so, maybe he'll transfer and dominate somewhere. I hope the best for him, but that's why he's not on there. And a couple other guys just aren't on there. I think tight end's a really hard position, and so the services do their best, but like I don't put as much into the pre-ranks for like Rivals and 247. So but these are the guys who've done it on the field, and that's my top 10 for 2022, with the caveat, we talked a lot of guys, but I'll just rehash here. I mean, I think McBride, Wettermeyer, and Kuthi, maybe Ferguson have the most fantasy appeal at this time for me. They're jockeying in a tier, with each other. Probably. I'm not sure there's a very clear, separator there. They all kind of have some different pluses and minuses. McBride's number one, just because I see kind of the least weaknesses, from what I can tell, at this time. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. That's your top 10 tight ends for 2022. And, like this, if you enjoy what you heard, subscribe, comment. I'm going to definitely get to any comments that you have, any further questions. A guy you like was left out. We're going to keep going. Obviously, now we've hit 2022, all the positions. We're going to move on to 2023 in short order and start looking even another year in the future. This is also going to be a podcast now, so look out for that. If you'd like to listen in the car, if you'd like to watch me, what I'm going to try to do for the videos is, insert some of the video clips behind me talking so you can see some of these players in action. But if you just want to listen at all, there'll be a podcast version. And yes, that's it. Like, subscribe. We want to keep this thing going, and could really use your support on those buttons. But other than that, have a great week, and we will see you next time.